And everyone has arrived. Thank you so much for your patience, y'all, and welcome back. Once again, my name is Robert. I am the League's Director of Election Engagement, and we're now talking about my stomping grounds, hashtag Let's Go Mets. Welcome to the Wilkesboro, Queens, New York. Panelists, please introduce yourself, what district you're running in, and 5 words or less why you are in this race. We'll start with Leonardo.
Hi, folks. Nice to meet everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Leonardo Ballaro. I'm running for City Council in District 22, representing Western Queens. And I'm running because I have the skills to problem solve and build consensus to solve today's challenging issues in the city.
Evie.
Hi, it's Evie running for City Council. It's okay. In District 22, I'm running because, in 5 words or less, serving my city is lit.
That's a good one. And apologies on your name. Tiffany.
Hey y'all, Tiffany Caban, also running in District 22, and 5 words or less. Defund police, fully fund communities.
Shekar.
Hi everyone, my name is Shekar Krishnan. I'm running for City Council in Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, Queens. And I'm running because I understand how important it is for everyone to have a home.
Alfonso.
I'm Alfonso Quiroz, running in the 25th Council District, which encompasses Jackson Heights and Elmhurst, and I'm running to make NYC affordable for all.
Julia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Foreman. I'm running in District 26, covering Long Island City, Sunnyside, Woodside, Dutch Kills, and parts of Astoria. And in 5 words or less, I am running to make sure that the future is designed for us.
Brent.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brent O'Leary, also running for District Council in the 26th, Sunnyside, Woodside, Long Island City, parts of Astoria. And our campaign is based on social and economic justice. So our words will be making the American dream a reality.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And it appears that Councilmember Holden, who was to join us this evening, has not joined us. Is that correct? Having a hard time seeing all the folks on the Zoom, y'all, but it looks like he's not here. He had warned us that he might not be able to make it due to a small emergency in his family. So hopefully everything is well for him. We wish him and his family all the best. Thank you so much for committing to this, Mr. Holden, Councilmember Holden, but we understand that you were not able to attend. So once again, everyone, I'll remind you of what we told our previous panel. For all these questions, we're going to be keeping strict track of time. So when your time comes up, you will be muted and we will move on to the next panelist. We're going to keep with the theme from the first panel of space. First questions are going to be for the candidates of Council District 22. We don't jokingly call Astoria Actoria for nothing, but there are few options for performance and rehearsal spaces in that area. So Evie, we'll start with you. You suggested having artists provide arts education classes for students in public schools in exchange for access to underused spaces after school hours. We love this idea. It's actually one Lit has had success with in the past. We had a very similar program with IS 204 in Astoria, but that was a small program. It was created and run by the fearless and dedicated Randy Berry. It was in collaboration with partners in an after-school program. So how would we scale that kind of program up citywide? You have 90 seconds to respond.
Okay, well, I would try and form partnerships first with the Office of Community Schools, because those are natural places that provide services beyond just the regular academics. So those spaces actually have a CBO partner who helps coordinate relationships and partnerships with different community organizations, service providers, people outside the school community, and they bring those partners in. So I think in terms of scaling it up to begin, I would start with the Office of Community Schools and develop a relationship there, because they have a community school director who can be that person that facilitates that relationship. So that's the first place that I would start. Right there, you could go right into 200 schools. You could not only have rehearsal space during after school hours, but they're also, some of them have beautiful auditoriums where you could actually hold performances. So that's one way that I would start to scale. Then I would look to other kind of schools, schools that are newly built that are accessible as well. You want to make sure that you have accessibility for all your artists and also the people that are coming to those venues. So I'd identify those schools next. Because not every school in New York City is accessible. So those are two ways that I would do it. It's kind of a barter system, but I would also put more funds in there to help artists have, and venues and performance theaters have the funds that they need to also do their work after the barter exchange.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Leonardo, similar question for you. You also advocated for making use of underutilized spaces during off hours. Again, heck yeah. You also talked about the city paying artists directly for future, as you put, socially distanced arts festivals as part of a larger COVID recovery plan, and the creation of community-supported art programs. Talk to us about what you see as the role of the city in promoting the creation of art and access to art for all citizens. 90
Yeah.
seconds.
Absolutely, Robert. So it was similar to Evie's response just on the space thing. I was a co-founder of a New York City public high school, and there was many times where our auditorium was dark, and that just seems like it's an underutilized resource. And, you know, I think the city, the Department of Ed could chip in paying permits to just keep the school open, extended hours, as well as libraries. I think they're another underutilized resource potentially for collaboration between, visitors of the library, users of the library, and artists itself. In terms of the city's role, as we recover and we regroup from this, from this economic crisis, I think the city needs to advocate both, for public awareness campaigns to get folks more involved locally with their artists. You know, there's programs where have been models that have been pretty successful in other cities where, similar to how we buy produce from farmers, it's similar as well. We can create initiatives where the local community is in touch with local artists, and there's an exchange of not only ideas and presentation of their work, but then there's an added public awareness campaign on top of that, where the city is saying, let's support local. So that's an example where the city could come in and give funds for awareness campaigns and make connections between artists and local residents.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next, questions for Tiffany. You wrote in your responses, we need to do more to create opportunities for artists to do what they love and continue to enrich our communities with the arts. Heck yeah. In specific, what ways can the city government encourage that sort of community enrichment while supporting independent artists and performance venues? And what could you do as a member of council to make it happen?
Yeah, so I touched on it a little bit in actually one of my last answers, talking about one of the most impactful experiences I had with theater was being able to watch performers of color on stage. And the piece of it that I didn't share with y'all is that I didn't have that experience until my freshman year of college. Right. And so, making sure that, again, when we are looking at increasing access to the arts, that is equitable access, and that we are introducing Black, Brown, immigrant, lower income communities to the arts as early as we possibly can. How do we do this? Again, we have a $6 billion+ bloated police budget. We should be, reallocating those resources into things that keep us safe and healthy. And the arts are one of them. We know that the city council can, for example, provide funding and grants for programs in our schools. We also know what it does for antisocial behavior, for reparative experiences. We know that it works much better than having police in schools, dealing with children, but that when we introduce and increase arts and music and performance, that it is good for holistic health. And it's going to be really important as we come back from a pandemic where we shouldn't be really focusing so much on, the math and the science and all these things, but actually what do our students need? Taking care of their holistic health is going to be really, really important as we're coming back. Making sure that we have more opportunities for social emotional learning and the performing arts are a huge, huge piece of that. And then one of the other things that I really would like to do is explore, when I talk about who has access and who doesn't, explore the possibility of stimulating our economy, because we are in the worst recession that we've had since the Great Recession.
And that is time. Thank you so much. Sorry to have to cut you off there, but we're keeping everybody to 90 seconds. Now, I'm excited personally to get to my district, CD25. We'll start with a question for Shekar. Shekar, you call for better/easier access to public space. Crucially, the need for equity in that access. As you note, there's a clear lack of information about A, what space is available, and B, how to access it, not just for indie artists, but for all members of the community. How do you propose the city close that knowledge gap and get rid of the barriers to making use of the abundance of city-owned spaces that could be activated for more public use?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much, everyone, for having me on tonight's panel. It's so great to see you all. I think public space in our city for the arts and art performances is essential, both for protecting and expanding the arts, but also for the for New York City to thrive. And I know this firsthand because of all of my work around Diversity Plaza, which has become the town square in Jackson Heights, a place that didn't start that way when we first started out, but now has become a meeting point for organizing, for art actions, for art performances and music. One of the biggest things I've seen through that, however, is how much in the lack of resources our community of Jackson Heights and Elmhurst received for Diversity Plaza and for public spaces like communities like ours, and how difficult and bureaucratic it is to be able to hold events in those spaces. So from my own work there, I think it's so important that the city do far more to invest in neighborhoods like ours, whether it's Diversity Plaza, 34th Avenue, Open Street, or Traverse Park, to make sure that our communities have the resources to make and create spaces for performances in those public spaces, and also that the information is disseminated by the Department of Transportation, other city agencies, so organizations know as easily as possible how to access those spaces for events and performances. But directly from my work with Diversity Plaza, I know how crucial that is of an issue in our city and how inequitable it is when it comes to open space in our city as well. And I'm committed to fighting to protect that open space and expanding it for the arts.
Thank you so much. Next question is for Alfonso. You advocate for connecting artists with city agencies, their elected officials, their surrounding communities, and each other. While this is totally something an individual council member could do, and all of you should do if and when you are elected, can you envision a model, a program, an agency, something, anything, whereby this kind of embedding community artists as integral to a healthy community, which you noted in your responses and many have mentioned already in this panel, that sort of thinking can be implemented and scaled citywide? 90 seconds.
Sorry, I was on mute. Robert, thank you very much for having me. This really meant a lot to me to be here today, because partially the reason why I'm here is because I was involved in theater in high school and in college. I actually performed in Stalag 17 as a character who was from Boston. And part of my research, I had to research somebody that had a really Boston, thick Irish accent, and that person was John F. Kennedy. As soon as I started to get to listen to him a lot more, I started learning a little bit more and really a lot more about his politics, and became more involved in politics because of that. The reason why I'm here right now is because of my involvement in theater. One of the things that I'm most proud of that I've been working on in the past couple of years right here in Queens is my work with Queens Theater. I've been on the board for many years, been a member, and just a person that's always gone there for a very, very long time. One of the things that we did there was a program called Queens Theater for All, where we partnered with the disability community to make sure not only were we allowing them access to see these programmings, but we were also involving them in the plays. So we created different types of programs where they could learn how to become good actors, where they could learn voice, where they could get different types of training, different workshops, and then we actually were casting them in the plays. I think that's really important, that we start to look out to some of these other communities and try to really incorporate them in all the programmings that we do, especially here in Queens.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move over to Council District 26, where the next council member will be taking over the seat currently held by the chair of the Cultural Affairs Committee, and where we've seen some recent space casualties. The Chain got pushed out of LIC a few years back. COVID has closed the Secret Theater. It's also closed Spaceworks in LIC and everywhere. So first question is for Julia. You've been very involved in land use issues in the past, and it's a theme for the night. I'm sure everyone's noticed access to space is a major issue for indie artists like us. In your questionnaire response, you called for updating zoning and tax codes that currently make live workspaces harder to construct and art space harder to maintain. You call on this to make spaces more prevalent in CD 26 and across the city. What sorts of changes do you think would be most effective, and how would you convince city government that those changes are necessary? 90 seconds.
Sure, absolutely. So, I'm very proud of the arts platform that we put out pretty early. We have always had an emphasis on this campaign. My campaign is made up, honestly, mostly of artists, and we had a roundtable with artists this summer to come up with these ideas. the live work idea definitely works more when it comes to the visual arts, because that's studio space, and the zoning and the tax codes really pertain a lot to the potentially hazardous materials and making sure that, height requirements and all of that is met. But when it comes to the performing arts, I want to point to my participation and my presence as a board member of the Western Queens Community Land Trust, which really does focus a lot of my land use work. One thing that we are trying to do is emphasize that we're not just looking to create a land trust of housing. We're looking at commercial space, community space, and performance space and artist space is a big part of that. As you said, we have lost a lot of our art spaces. You brought up the Secret Theater, but we've also lost Creek and the Cave, and others are, being threatened with being closed soon too. I think that what we need to do is really reimagine how we use land in this entire city. No longer can it be something that is truly just focused on making profit for some, but rather on serving our community and making sure that everyone has what they need. Through a land trust, when the community is the one who owns it and stewards it, that space is going to be permanently and deeply affordable. And I think that we're seeing a growing movement across the city, whether it be downtown, uptown, the Bronx, to create these land trusts and to use them for things. And I think in the recovery, we have to show due to our artists, who are what sustained us when all of us were stuck at home. We were watching TV.
Thank you so much, and sorry to cut you off. We're going to go next to Brent. A similar sort of a question. You expressed concern at the displacement of arts venues and called for promoting community land trusts for artists that are designed for long-term affordable work art space, noting that there are actually spaces in the 26th to do this, and called for, as you said, designing larger scale cultural centers that can then house smaller ones inside and working to allow local cultural institutions to cohabitate in larger spaces. Now, this kind of like umbrella organization providing support for indie artists setup is something that's very familiar to those of us in the indie theater world. See ARTNY, The Field, Fractured Atlas, Spaceworks, RIP. How could you make such a space/program sustainable from your position on the council?
Okay, yes, and as you mentioned, so I'm on the steering committee also of the Community Land Trust, and that's a way that we can keep things affordable for artists. We've been losing our artists left and right, but I've actually already identified spaces. So the Annabelle Basin is one which is going to be developed. We got together with a lot of our local community members and have put in a plan to actually have that, which is public land right now, which could be used for work art space. There's also another space in Woodside that we're looking at, which is where Club Lao is right now, who's supporting our campaign. And the Thalia Theater, actually, we already have money designated for that, which is also, when it's going to be built, is going to be able to house smaller institutions. So there are a number of developments. As you know, I mean, Long Island City is development ground zero. A lot of these things are public land, so we have the right to say what it goes to. And, I'm proud to be the first candidate in this district to ever refuse money from real estate developers. I don't think you can be a friend of artists and real estate developers at the same time. So I've told them any development, and not all development is bad, it has to be for the benefit of our neighborhood. And a large part of that neighborhood is our artist community. So when these developments are happening, we are going to demand that it could be done as a community land trust, or it will be done as a rent regulated space, and those will be designated for artists. So we have a strong plan in place to make sure that we keep affordable work art space for our artist community here.
Thank you very much. Now, you might have noticed we talk a lot about space. So we're going to now have a video question from a Queens constituent who runs a space. So let's roll the video.
Hi, my name's Cambry Cruz, and I'm the owner of QED, which is a multi-purpose performing arts space in Astoria, Queens. The arts sector, as you know, has been the hardest hit through the pandemic, and we've really received almost zero support from the city and the state. QED is something that I invested my life savings into opening, and I am at risk personally on my commercial lease. There's currently a personal liability moratorium on commercial leases, which is set to expire soon. And while the City Council is trying to extend that moratorium, till the end of June, it is a moratorium on the collection of the personal liability, but not a complete wiping out of the personal liability debt as a result of the losses incurred during the pandemic. So what I would like to see and get an answer to is, how can we extend this personal liability protection beyond June, especially for the arts sector, which isn't even allowed to reopen until April and is unlikely to bounce back to normal for quite some time after that. I'd like to see it not only extended, but also that I should not be held personally liable for something that was completely beyond my control. Once we're about to reopen, and for anything beyond that, sure, put that personal liability back in there. But what can we do to protect folks like me who've invested their life savings and reinvested into their communities, and from basically losing everything they have? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cambry, for your question. Candidates, we're going to have 60 seconds to respond to this one. Again, I'm just going to kind of go through a random order here. We'll start with Shekar.
Protecting commercial spaces and commercial tenants is so critical. And I think there are a few different ways to do so, both in the short term and in the long term. First, in the short term, just like we have an eviction moratorium, we extend that personal liability moratorium indefinitely or as long as possible to ensure no one who has it as a result of COVID incurring that liability actually incurs it in practice. Two, we need to enshrine this protection in commercial rent control and make sure it is a function of any commercial lease for commercial tenants. And three, we need to actually fund and expand commercial lease assistance program, which is a legal services program in New York City, to protect small businesses in these situations and fight against commercial landlords that seek personal liability. These are ways to do so in the short term because of COVID, but also in the long term to defend against personal liability for small business owners like QED as well.
Thank you so much. Brent.
Yeah, as an attorney, I've dealt with this problem a number of times. As you know, the large corporations, as soon as they run out of business, they walk away because they're a corporation and there's no personal liability. And that's what we need for small business. I've been one of the strongest advocates for small business, and we'll make sure the chilling effect that would have that you have to gamble your whole life savings to start a business is wrong. So we're gonna make sure that an artist can start a business, a small business can start, and you shouldn't have to have personal liability for that, especially with the pandemic, even without the pandemic. But a pandemic is not something you can plan for, and that's what you have government for, to step in right here and say, you know, you can go after the assets, we're gonna stop evictions, try to get you back on your feet, but not go after people's personal liabilities, because that is just bad for our business, bad for our economy, and bad for our community.
Thank you very much. Leonardo.
Additionally, our small business owners are, have the heart of entrepreneurs and are resilient, right? And we have to help them get through this current crisis, because once we're back on our feet, when they're back on their feet, they're going to keep doing what they're great at and their business will thrive. But I do also believe that we need to extend the moratorium in the long term. Commercial rent control, it's a policy that I call for on my website for small business relief. We need to work on that. It's a complicated issue, but I think we could get it done. And then also in terms of providing funding, there are federal, state, and local level grants. The local grants seem to be really small. We need to think about ways to give targeted grants to art institutions. One example that I like to call attention to, the Queensborough president, brought in the philanthropy. He brought in the owners of the Mets to do a lot of these micro targeted grants to businesses in Queens. Where is Kaufman, the anchor in our district? Where is De Niro and his?
Thank you. That was 60 seconds. Julia.
Yes, hi. And I want to thank Cambry for all of her work. I know she's been a real advocate for performance arts. Very quickly, because we only have a minute, I do want to say, first and foremost, I want to make sure that everyone here, and I'm sure that you are, is aware of the grant that the federal government has now put out for performing arts. And I think that it would be incumbent on the city, even just as a candidate, I'm happy to help anyone navigate that process when it opens up in April. We do need to extend this moratorium well beyond even at the point where things are allowed to reopen, because a lot of our small businesses and arts organizations are going to be having to build back up from the loss of the year. We need to make sure that the loss of the past year in terms of business, in terms of working, is something that people are able to take their time and not feel a rush or a crunch to bounce back from. So the moratorium should be extended, yes, till the end when people are allowed to reopen, but even beyond that, and we do need to provide direct financial relief, as well as aid in navigating the ways to access whatever is available.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Tiffany.
Oops, I'm
You
having
raised your hand.
technical
Okay.
difficulties over here. I don't want to repeat a lot of what folks said. I absolutely agree with that. We have to cancel rent. We have to extend the moratorium. On the state level, we have to tax the rich. I sound like a broken record, but we have to defund the police and fund our arts infrastructure. And a couple of things that I would add is that we need a public bank, right? We need equitable investments and affordable financial services for folks so that these businesses aren't exploited. And the other thing too is that we need to recognize that these folks like Cambry and so many others are the first ones to invest back in our communities. I think of having even a political event at her venue a couple of years ago. My friend is a manager of the Wild Project and eco-conscious theater on the Lower East Side, who sponsored a football team in a gay football league that I played in, creating a community space for us to come in, to host fundraisers, to engage with our community. So, again, building off of the things that other folks said, but, really leaning into more direct funds and access to our business owners, and then a public bank to make sure that there isn't exploitation in the process.
Thank you so much. Alfonso.
Yes, I agree with that. We should absolutely extend the moratorium and do everything we can to help these small theaters and these small venues. We have to remember that what they do is bringing in a lot of revenue sources for our city. And right now we need to be looking at those sources and making sure that nothing is encumbering them to make sure that they are successful and that they come to fruition. So it's really, really important that we do whatever we can to help a lot of these small venues out and to make sure that they succeed.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Evie.
Hi. Yeah, so I agree that we need to obviously extend the, beyond June. Cambry and I have talked about that. I think it's really important. Right now, we don't have a Queens City Council member on the Small Business Committee. And we should really get someone who is in the arts community to be on that committee, because arts the industry comprises 7% of our GDP. So I think there's an issue there with kind of getting the message out to the community, because there was a hearing in the City Council last week, which I think Cambry testified at, I couldn't, about this very, very issue, right? So we need to have someone in City Council who is going to work with the arts community to let them know about bills and legislation and extensions that apply to them. I would say that in addition to the things that were mentioned, which I all support, and wiping out the debt that people may have incurred once the moratorium is over, is we need to also look at the Small Business Jobs Survival Act. Because right now you could have commercial rent regulations and rent control, but if you can't renew your lease, that doesn't do you any good. So having a right to renew your lease, being able to negotiate with your landlord, and if that doesn't work, then you go to arbitration, is a great way for our independent theaters, our venues, all these organizations to be able to stay in the spaces that they have.
Great. And we just have a couple minutes left, so we're going to bring everybody back onto the screen here. We're going to do a little bit of thumbs up, thumbs down. So I'm going to give you a little preamble here, and then I'm going to ask you to tell us, are you on board or are you against? With Lower Manhattan, it's the birthplace of indie theater, but we independent theater artists are everywhere. We are in Brooklyn basements, we are in Queens factories, we're in Brooklyn parks. Everywhere that there is a spot we can find, indie theater lives. But too often we hit roadblocks accessing available space, even knowing where the available spaces are, costs, regulation issues. The open culture legislation is helping to open up some new avenues, pun completely intended, for performance. But first question, thumbs up, thumbs down. Do you support expanding access to open culture? What I'd like to see. Do you support making open culture permanent? All right. Would you support a program that offered vacant, city-owned space to cultural nonprofits for free or very low cost? And do you support the creation of a director of the public realm to make public spaces more transparently accessible to all New Yorkers? I love all the, okay, we got one no on that one. Okay, so thank you all so much for being here. Thank you all so much for your very thoughtful responses. We are out of time, but Queens, I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for repping the borough so well. Now, once again, I'm going to pass the evening over to our entertainment, Mariko the Clown.